Part 69. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 722. Rog swung the vine whip and threw it out. This vine whip quickly wove into a net like a swimming snake. The net formed by the rattan whip will firmly catch the southward birds. After Siang Naniao was caught in the net, he was still struggling violently. But Rog used the power of the plant fruit to further tighten the net formed by the rattan whip. Rog pulled the netted bird to his side. Seeing the Naniao who was firmly caught in the net but still struggling, Rog said, "Okay, now you can go back with me. But don't worry, we won't kill you, because you are still very useful." Rog took the successfully captured southward birds to the three ships. Soon, Roger returned to the Mary. Everyone cheered when they saw the southward bird that Rog brought back. The southward bird was placed on the deck of the Mary. "Is this the Xiongnan bird?" Sanji stared strangely at the captured southern bird. "It just acts like a magnet. Points south." Usopp held his chin in thought. Luffy was even more excited, and directly mentioned Xiongnan bird. This Xiongnan bird struggled hard, but in Luffy's hands it was about the same as a chicken. Siang Naniao struggled hard, but at this moment everyone found a problem. That is, the head of a south-facing bird is always facing one direction no matter what. That is the south direction. Usopp said, "Look, the head of this southward bird is facing one direction, and it is south." Luffy observed carefully and said, "That's right, the head of this big-headed bird is always facing south." Luffy put the south bird on the deck. At this time the south bird was tied by Rog's vine whip and could not escape. Everyone began to observe Xiongnan bird to their heart's content. As expected, the head of the south-facing bird is always facing south. Now because it is still sailing along the coastline of Gaia Island, it is still possible to judge the correct direction of east, west, north, and south. Nami looked at the south-facing bird and said, "Really, this south-facing bird really has its head facing south. There is such a magical creature in nature." Zoro looked at Nami and said, "You can also feel the weather changes with your skin." Rog looked at the southward bird, which kept pointing its head at the south, and said, "Creatures themselves have a natural ability to sense nature. This kind of southward bird is an extremely powerful natural compass." Luffy looked directly at the captured southward bird and said, "Really, it seems that you, Sauron, are not as good as animals." Zoro, who was poked in a painful spot, scolded Luffy with an ugly face, "Can you please stop being so ugly?" After the southward bird was captured, everyone talked about it, and it was very angry. Chirp. After the south bird called, it suddenly turned its head to the north. Discovering this, Luffy suddenly squatted down and looked at the angry Siang Naniao. Luffy said, "This bird is going to become a northward bird." Usopp looked at Xiongnan birds forcibly turning his head. Usopp said, "It turned out to be like this. It seems that it is angry with us." The southward bird continued to insist on turning his head to the north. But this bird, which is born to turn its head to the south, also has its tolerance limit. It's like humans have to walk on two legs under normal circumstances, although they can also stand on their heads, it doesn't last long. This Xiongnan bird was angry, but he still couldn't bear it. In the end, the southward bird couldn't bear it, and finally had to turn its head from north to south again. Luffy looked at Siang Naniao, who had failed in anger, and said with a smile, "Ha ha ha, it seems that you still can't beat your head in anger." Siang Naniao looked reluctant, but it had no choice but to admit defeat obediently. In this way, the people who captured the southward bird continued to move forward, and after leaving the southeastern part of Gaia Island, they began to turn northward. After refitting the Mary, the Victory Hunter, and the Yutan Detection, the three ships continued to head north. However, during this time they can still sail close to the coastline of Gaia Island. After continuing to sail north for a while, the three ships arrived at the position where they were about to leave Gaia Island. Everyone here can see a strange building on Gaia Island. The building appears to be a two-story building that appears to have been around for many years. But what is incredible is that this small two-story building was cut from the side. You can actually see the interior structure of the two-story building from here. Luffy saw the two-story building and said, "What a strange building. It looks like it was split open." Usopp looked at the two-story building and said, "It's indeed strange. Could it be that this two-story building suffered some terrible force that caused it to look like this?" Brother Luo looked at the two-story building and said, "It's so strange. Could it be that this two-story building was built by the ground, destroyed by earthquakes? And this building looks so old." Mont Blanc Kulik looked at the two-story building. In fact, he found this strange building after he broke into the Great Route and arrived at Gaia Island. Mont Blanc Kulik was extremely happy at that time, because this ancient building that seemed to have been cut off further confirmed the existence of the remains of the legendary Golden Land on Gaia Island. Because the legend of Mont Blanc no Lando's Golden Country was misrepresented as a lie, but Mont Blanc Kulik, who inherited the secrets of the Mont Blanc family, knew very well that the existence of those legends was not groundless. However, after suffering for so many years, the receipts were still limited, and Mont Blanc Kulik was unable to figure out the further secrets of the Golden Land. In addition, after Grandet grew stronger, the Iruyama United Army was forced to change course and act as a resistance force. It wasn't until the Straw Hat Pirates appeared, and the Grandet forces and the Bellamy Pirates were destroyed one after another during the battle, that Mont Blanc Kulik was able to return to his original goal of reaching Gaia Island. Thinking of this, Mont Blanc Kulik looked away from the two-story building. He turned his eyes to the sea. After all, the sea is the immediate goal. The Saruyama Allied forces are going to escort the Straw Hat Pirates and the modified Mary to the sea area where the rising current is about to appear. The three ships continued sailing and finally left Gaia Island completely. On the way, we also passed the Reef Island. The three pirate ships, the modified Melee, the Victory Hunter, and the Ulton Detector, sailed together into the sea north of Gaia Island. Everyone set out in the morning, and as time passed, it was noon. The three ships slowed down, and everyone started to eat lunch on their respective ships. Of course Sanji had considered this in advance. Before departure, we prepared a large amount of cold meat, bread, cheese, and other portable foods. Now everyone can eat and drink quickly and definitely have enough to eat. Three ships also continued sailing. While sailing, the sky suddenly became dark. Pirates plant fruit. Pirate plant fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 723. Rog and Sanji both looked at the sky strangely. MB. The sky suddenly became extremely dark. Usopp looked at the sky and said, "What happened? Now the sky has turned into darkness. How could it be like this?" Luffy looked up at the sky and said, "It's really pitch black." Chopper looked at the sky with a serious face, and he recalled a previous experience. That was when everyone had just entered the waters near Gaia Island. The sky suddenly changed. It was daytime just a moment ago, and then it quickly turned into night. Then there were those terrible huge shadows. Thinking of those things, Chopper still has lingering fears. Thinking of this, Chopper said worriedly, "It's really terrible, who knows what will happen next." Roger looked at the dark sky. "It's really dark." Roger was very emotional. Nami looked at the sky worriedly. X. There was no sun in the sky, and it looked extremely terrifying. Nami felt terrified for a while, and she said worriedly, "This is simply too scary, what will happen next?" At this time, Sanji showed courtesy to Nami. He put his arms around Nami's body and said, "Miss Nami, don't worry. A gentleman will protect you." Mont Blanc on the Yutan probe looked at the dark sky. Mont Blanc said, "The sky looks like this. It seems to be the effect of cumulus clouds." G. Emperor Cloud. Sanji and the others looked at Mont Blanc with confusion. Mont Blanc looked to the sky and recognized this natural phenomenon. He explained, because frequent submarine volcanic activities eject a large amount of ocean material into the sky. Some of the seafloor minerals are also washed into the sky. These seafloor minerals mix with the water vapor in the sky to form cumulus clouds. It is said that these cumulus clouds can make objects float on it like the sea. However, cumulus clouds will cause astonishing darkness in the sea below X. Mont Blanc's explanation allowed Rog and Sanji to understand the real reason for the darkness in the sky. Sanji said, "I see, the darkness of the sky is caused by those cumulus clouds." Nami's complexion became a little better, and she said, "But it looks like the end of the world no matter what." At this time, Mont Blanc said, "Okay, everyone, please turn on the lights." The modified Mary, Victory Hunter, and Ulton Detection all turned on the oil lamps on the ship. Especially the Victory Hunter and Ulton Detection. These 200-meter-long heavy-duty pirate ships are also equipped with large searchlights on their hulls and masts. Use it like a giant lighthouse. Thanks to the lighting, the three ships were able to continue sailing on this dark sea. X. Mont Blanc said again, "Okay, now it's time for the southward bird to take full advantage of it." Everyone grasped the direction by relying on the southward bird. The three ships continued sailing through the darkness. After some voyages, we finally arrived at the previously explored sea area. Here is where an undersea volcano will erupt. Mont Blanc looked at the sea and said, "Everyone, we are almost at the point where the upwelling current will erupt. A huge submarine volcano is about to erupt. Submarine volcanoes have started to act violently in this area, and the rising current is about to erupt on the bottom of the sea here. At that time, there will be a huge current that will go straight to the sky." When they thought of this, no matter it was Rog, Sanji, Usopp, Luffy, Chopper and Nami, they were all very excited. Sauron and Robin, who have always been silent, are also looking forward to riding the powerful upwelling current. After the orangutan talked with his crew, he told Mont Blanc, "Okay, we have reached the point where the rising current is about to erupt." Mont Blanc said, "Okay, escort our friend's ship to the jetting position." The Victory Hunter and the Ulton Detector together escorted the location in front of the modified Melly where the jet stream was about to erupt. The modified Mary continued to sail, and finally reached the position where the rising current was about to be jetted. At this time, the sea below was already unstable. Undersea volcanoes began to become violently active. The surface of the sea began to shake. On the Mary, Roger looked at the sea below. "What an adventure!" Sanji looked at the sea below and said, "Okay, there's going to be a big explosion here." Under the sea, a huge submarine volcano started to move on the bottom of the sea, and this huge submarine crater first sucked in seawater. A large amount of seawater was sucked into the submarine crater and gradually formed a vortex. The vortex is getting bigger and bigger. On the surface of the sea, after intense swimming, a huge eddy began to appear. This huge vortex began to show an increasing trend of expansion. Mont Blanc looked at the accelerating and expanding vortex and said, "Okay, everyone. Now the journey to Sky Island has officially begun. It is good." Everyone on the Mary was in high spirits. According to the plan, the refitting of the Mary must first enter the vortex. After modifying the Melee ship, 2 huge iron chains were connected to the Victory Hunter and Ulton probe respectively. This is so that the modified Mary can get close to the center of the submarine whirlpool without being completely involved. On the deck of the Mary, Rog and Usopp saw that the vortex on the seabed was getting bigger and bigger. Usopp saw the expanding sea vortex, his face was serious, but his body was actually trembling. "I'm suffering from the disease of being unable to go to the empty island. No, it can't be like this. After all, we have no turning back. Well, Captain Usopp will lead everyone to the empty island. Although Usopp was scared in his heart, on the surface he still insisted on trying hard. Chopper's face was ugly, but this little guy had a kind of confidence. Chopper looked at the growing whirlpool on the seafloor and said, "We can get to the Sky Island safely, right?" Nami looked terrified when she saw the ever-expanding underwater vortex. Nami looked horrified and said, "It's really scary." After seeing Nami's face turn pale, Sanji hurriedly said, "Miss Nami, a gentleman will always be by your side." Rog looked at the ever-expanding submarine vortex. As the submarine vortex continued to expand, it finally began to involve the refitted Mary ship. The hull of the modified Melly began to bump violently. Anti-collection, automatic loading failed, click mode, the following content is hidden, please exit reading mode. Aeon Sikdavidiv. Pirates Plant Fruit /L. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 725. The upwelling current keeps rising, and the Mary also keeps going upwards along the upwelling current, a huge soaring water column. Everyone on the modified Melly was shocked. Usopp looked at the flying pirate ship below him. Although this pirate ship is not really flying, it propels into the sky with the huge impact of the rising sea current. Usopp said with emotion, "It is indeed our Mary. It flies without any fuss." The Mary continued to rush skyward. Luffy said excitedly, "Wow! We are finally really flying." At this time, the Melly was flying rapidly into the sky with the rising current. In the distance, Mont Blanc Kulik looked at the rising current. He was shocked to see this huge upwelling current rushing into the sky. Not only Mont Blanc Kulik, but also the apes and orangutans, as well as the crew members on the Victory Hunter and Utan Detection were all looking at the huge upwelling current. This rising sea current rushed straight into the sky, and it was extremely powerful. The sky that was originally covered by the dark cumulus cloud seemed to be broken by this huge soaring ocean current. The huge soaring ocean current completely shook the sky. Mont Blanc Kulik looked at the soaring current. The man with the chestnut on his head said, "I wish you a safe journey, young men." Now all the tasks of the Saruyama United Army have been completed, and they can only watch the Straw Hat Pirates rushing to the sky on the rising current. The huge soaring water column formed by the upwelling current continued to erupt. The Mary continued to soar toward the sky along this massive column of water. On the deck of the Mary, Roger turned his head and looked down the ship. I saw that the sea below was getting smaller and smaller, and even Gaia Island could be seen more clearly. Now in the sky, the whole picture of Gaia Island can be seen clearly. This island, which everyone has fought for countless years, is perfectly presented to everyone. It's really spectacular. Rog looked at Gaia Island with emotion. The island became smaller and smaller in sight. Nami looked at the rising current, and at this time, this huge column of water was rushing towards the sky. Even Nami couldn't imagine this situation. But Nami is a genius navigator after all. She began to think about some problems after the initial shock. Nami looked at the wings installed on both sides of the ship. Each of these huge wings was 20 meters long, which further accelerated the speed of the modified Melly under the huge driving force of the rising sea current. Huge upwelling currents also bring huge winds. Huge winds lashed violently into the sky from the sea below. When the rising current maintains a huge water column, there are still a lot of waves flying. This spectacular sight is even more exciting than when the Straw Hat Pirates climbed the Upside Down Mountain. The Upside Down Mountains are nothing more than tall peaks, and the upwelling currents reach straight into the sky. Nami suddenly felt that the hull of the refitted Mary began to shake violently, and then the speed of the hull began to slow down, and the bow began to tilt up. When Nami saw this situation, she quickly said, "No, the propulsion force on the ship's hull has weakened. Others have discovered this, too. Roger also felt that the hull was slowing down and even falling. Oops, the propulsion from upwelling currents is not infinite. Rog looked at the hull and saw that the hull was intensifying its tendency to sink. At this moment, Chopper suddenly shouted in horror, "Oh my God! What is that?" Everyone else quickly looked upward. I saw a huge figure falling from the upper part of the rising current. This huge figure is exactly the meter-long huge Neptune that everyone saw before. The volume of this huge Sea King is dozens of times larger than that of the refitted Melee. But this giant Neptunian fell from the sky and fell into the sea below. Everyone looked at this huge Sea King with horrified expressions. This giant Sea King continued to fall into the sea below. That huge head passed by the modified Mary. The huge eyes of this huge fish Neptune stared at the people on the modified Melee, making everyone who was stared at feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. Usopp and Chopper hugged each other and shouted in horror, "It's too scary." The giant Sea King then plummeted into the sea below. Rog said, "The fate of this Neptune type is that it loses its propulsion power." Usopp and Chopper were crying almost crazy. They cried with tears and runny noses, "Oh my God! We are finished." At this time, Nami was so anxious that she decisively gave the order to the others, "Hurry up and raise the sails." Nami herself is a genius navigator with precise judgment, and her orders are absolutely correct. Rog, Sauron, and the others hurriedly raised the sails of the refitted Mary. After the ship's sail was raised, it began to accelerate and continue sailing higher. The bow of the ship that started to fall from the rising current began to stabilize again, and continued to rush towards the higher sky along the huge soaring water column. This huge column of water continues to soar into the sky. The modified Melee continued to sail rapidly skyward along the upwelling current. Relying on a pair of additional wings, sails and the propulsion of the upwelling current, this small pirate ship continued to sail towards the sky. The modified Mary rides the wind and waves and flies into the sky. After sailing, the Melee finally broke through the cumulus cloud along with the rising current. The Mary, which had broken through the cumulus cloud, finally saw the sun again. The sun was shining brightly on the hull of the Mary. Everyone on the Melee was very excited to see the sun again. But the huge upwelling current is still not over. Rising currents continued to push the modified Mary to higher altitudes. The modified Mary continued to fly, and finally stopped at an unbelievable altitude of meters and began to fall downwards. Because the huge upwelling current finally disappeared. Sprayed to an altitude of meters, the upwelling current that the refitted Mary rides this time is also a very powerful one. The modified Mary now began to fall downwards. The faces of everyone on the deck of the Melee changed drastically. "My God! We're going to fall." Chopper was so frightened that tears flowed down his face. "Oops, what are we going to do now?" Usopp growled in horror. At this time, we can only slow down the falling speed quickly. Zoro quickly prepared 3 samurai swords. Shweze, Goite and Hideo Yizi were all pulled out of the scabbards at their waists. 3 sword style. Tornado. Zoro used 3 katana swords to create a tornado. The tornado formed by the sword chi surrounded the modified Mary, slightly slowing down the falling speed of the pirate ship. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 726. Luffy didn't stay idle either, he quickly jumped to the top of the mast. Rubber. Giant parachute. Luffy's 4 arms quickly stretched out and grabbed the 4 sides of the Mary's hull. Luffy's torso was quickly pulled apart and became bigger, as if it were a huge parachute. After Luffy used the rubber giant parachute, the modified hull of the Melee did indeed slow down the fall a little bit. When everyone was at a loss, Rog also made a move. Rog used his plant fusion ability to stretch out 4 huge leaves from his hands. Giant parachute leaves? Rog used almost all the plant fruit power in his body to inject these 4 huge leaves. Under the action of Rog's powerful plant fruit power, the 4 huge leaves began to look like 4 giant parachutes. 4 giant parachutes with a diameter of meters hoisted the melee, but these giant parachutes were all huge leaves. After Rog used these 4 giant parachute leaves, the falling speed of the Mary finally slowed down. The hull of the Mary continued to fall, but at a much slower speed. Finally, the Mary finally landed on a cloud. But what is shocking is that the hull of the Melly actually floats on it. Usopp's whole body trembled for a while, then he collapsed on the deck and said, "I'm saved." Chopper was panting heavily, and he lay on the deck feeling dizzy. Luffy also ended his parachute form and returned to his normal human form, standing on the deck and looking around. "We are really floating on the clouds. Ho ho." Luffy stood on the deck of the Mary, looking at the sea of clouds around him. Rog also walked to the edge of the Mary's hull, and he looked at the sea of clouds under the Mary's hull. These are really seas of clouds that can float ships. It seems that we have really come to Sky Island. It can now be confirmed that everyone has arrived at the destination they want to reach. Robin also walked to the side of the ship and observed the clouds below. These clouds can allow ships to float on them for navigation. It seems that they are the legendary White Sea. Robin knows a lot about the world. As an archaeologist, she naturally knows some legends about the ancient Sky Island information. Sauron looked at the clouds that could carry ships next to the hull of the Mary, and said, "It doesn't matter what kind of sea it is, since we are here, let's find a way out quickly." Usopp also went to the side of the boat and looked at the endless clouds around him. The fear of being frightened just now dissipated. Usopp became lively again. Usopp came to the side of the boat and looked at the clouds. "I like these clouds. Now that I'm here, I want to swim to my heart's content." Usopp quickly stood on the edge of the hull, and then jumped into the clouds. "Usopp? Where are you?" Luffy and Chopper were in a hurry, and quickly shouted at Usopp. At this moment, Usopp's head emerged from a cloud. He waved and shouted, "Captain Usopp is swimming in the clouds. It's so cool. Ha ha ha." Chopper and Luffy looked at Usopp, both of them were greedy. "It looks really cool." Both Luffy and Chopper envy Usopp. Usopp sings while swimming in the clouds. "Captain Usopp, he is brave and invincible. Captain Usopp, he has 8,000 subordinate. Captain Usopp, he swims in the sky." Usopp suddenly plunged his body down and began to swim deeper into the clouds. "Captain Usopp wants to explore the vast sky. Let me be free among the clouds. I am the great Captain Usopp." After Usopp dived into the clouds, he disappeared completely. Luffy and Chopper both had envious expressions. Chopper looked at the clouds and said, "It's really enviable, but it's a pity that I am a devil fruit user. I don't know if there will be any problem sneaking into these clouds. Because according to what Mont Blanc Kulik said before, a large amount of sea stone material was ejected to the cloud layer along with the soaring ocean current, which caused this place to become a white sea, but it also made the cloud layer material here contain some of the ordinary sea below. Similar substances. If this is the case, I am afraid that devil fruit ability users will not be able to swim in the White Sea here." Luffy seems to be eager to try, but although this adventurous sunny boy is not afraid of anything, he still has some basic rationality. After thinking about it, Luffy gave up his idea. Luffy looked at the clouds and said with some regret, "It's really like this. It's a pity that I can't go swimming. Huh. Why didn't Usopp come up for so long?" Luffy's words stunned both Rog and Sanji. Rog looked at the clouds, his face also changed. The clouds have a certain thickness. Will Usopp encounter any accidents if he swims like this? Roger looked at these clouds seriously, already having the worst result in his heart. Rog used the plant fusion ability, and a rattan whip quickly stretched out from his right hand. Rog further concentrated the power of the plant fruit to make this vine whip grow. The cane whip grew quickly and was thrown out by Roger. The rattan whip entered the clouds. But at this time, Rog's expression changed drastically. He said, "Oops, I can't locate Usopp." Robin said at this time, "Okay, leave it to me." Robin folded his hands on his chest, and activated the flowering fruit ability. Dazzled. Rog used a powerful ability move specially designed for observation. Rog also reacted to the vine whip he was throwing deep into the clouds. Many eyes suddenly grew on the rattan whip. These eyes are able to observe the situation in the clouds. As long as Rog's vine whip continues to extend, Robin can observe the situation in the clouds through the eyes growing from the vine whip. With these grown eyes, Robin can fully observe the situation in the clouds. The situation in the clouds was fully observed by Robin. At the same time, she directed Roger to change the direction of the vine whip. On the deck of the Mary, Robin directed Rog to change the direction of the vine whip. Stay to the left, just 20 meters further to the left. Robin is responsible for providing sight and guidance, while Rog concentrates on manipulating the rattan whip. Among the clouds, Usopp, who was diving, continued to swim below. But Usopp also felt a little bad. After diving for a while, he also remembered that there might be thickness in the clouds. This may mean that once Usopp dives to the lowest point of the cloud layer, he will fall out of the cloud layer. Oops, let's go back quickly. Usopp decided to hurry back to the top of the cloud, back to the Mary floating on the cloud. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 727. But just as he was about to do so, an unexpected accident happened. Usopp's body suddenly continued to fall. Just now, Usopp had already dived to the bottom of the cloud layer, but he fell before he could reach the upper reaches. "Oh my God!" Usopp shouted desperately, his whole body fell from the clouds. As Usopp fell rapidly, he was dazzled and looked around, only to see the clouds above getting further and further away. How did this happen? Aya. In his eagerness, Usopp also called out the name of his childhood sweetheart, the beautiful girl from his hometown. Usopp kept falling, and he felt as if he was falling into hell. At this moment, the vine whip guided by Robin, controlled by Rog, rushed out from under the clouds. This cane whip is covered with eyes created by Robin. The eyes created by Robin saw Usopp falling from the clouds. Robin informed Rog in time, and Rog manipulated the vine whip to change direction and began to rescue Usopp. The cane whip quickly approached Usopp, and wrapped around the stunned long-nosed man. The vine whip dragged Usopp up. On the deck of the refitted Mary above the clouds, Rog is manipulating the vine whip to pull Usopp up. "It's a good thing that you, Robin, helped me in time, otherwise I wouldn't be able to find Usopp." Rog concentrated on pulling up the rattan whip. Robin said calmly, "It's nothing, I'm just doing a little favor." Rog continued to use the vine whip, and finally Usopp was pulled up from the clouds. Rog put Usopp on the deck of the modified Mary. Gudong. Usopp landed on the deck of the Mary. The man with the long nose turned his eyes upside down and stared at his head. Usopp groaned and said, "I'm so dizzy that the world is upside down. Am I in hell?" After successfully rescuing Usopp, Rog breathed a sigh of relief. X33 Novel Mobile Version TTS. Roger suddenly felt short of breath for a while, and his chest was heavy. Not only Rog, Zoro, Sanji, and others also panted heavily one after another. How could this happen? Zoro covered his chest, feeling that his breathing was very difficult. Why is it so difficult to breathe? Sanji was also breathing hard. Luffy was still alive and kicking, but now he found it very difficult to breathe here. He quickly lay down on the deck, inhaled heavily, and then exhaled. Robin looked around, his face covered in sweat. "It's really hard to breathe here." Robin found it very difficult to breathe here. X. Nami also felt that it was difficult to breathe here. She lay half prone on the deck, breathing with difficulty. It's almost like entering a closed secret room. Nami felt dizzy because of her shortness of breath. Chopper was dazzled. This little guy had never been to such a high place, and now he was lying on the deck breathing heavily. Hoop 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 hoop. Everyone in the Straw Hat Pirates was struggling to breathe. After a while, everyone began to get used to the thin air here. Rog stood up again on the deck of the Melee and said, "The air here is thin, which makes it difficult for us to breathe. After all, this is the sky." Sanji struggled to stand up, took out another cigarette and lit it with a lighter. The curly-browed blonde gracefully smokes his cigarette. After Sanji smoked a cigarette, he spit out a smoke ring. "The air here is really thin." Sanji walked to the side of the boat and looked at the endless clouds. Usopp's whole body on the deck was trembling. The fear caused by him falling from the clouds just now has not disappeared. Usopp's whole body trembled, and he trembled and said, "It's too scary. It's too scary. The Sky Island is too scary." Now Usopp feels a lot of pressure, and his whole body is in pain. Originally, Usopp thought that the empty island was actually full of dangers, but now he was even more frightened. In this way, Usopp's whole body was in convulsions. But after some time, Usopp finally got better, and the man with the long nose finally stood up. Usopp stroked his head and gasped, "It's really a long time since I left the Hell Gate." Usopp now looked at everyone and said, "When I was in danger just now, I managed to escape to heaven with Captain Usopp's powerful ability. You all saw it, right?" As soon as Usopp recovered, he immediately became very bragging. Bigger Usopp is not exaggerated. Luffy looked at Usopp and said, "It's great that you are safe and sound." Zoro looked at the vast clouds and said with emotion, "It's really endless as far as the eye can see." 0. I saw the vast sea of clouds in front of me, boundless. The modified melee that everyone was riding on was floating in this vast cloud layer. At this time, suddenly there was a violent tremor in the clouds beside the Mary. Zoro felt very strange when he saw it and said, "What?" At the same time, a murderous aura rushed towards him, and Zoro instinctively put his hand on the katana scabbard at his waist. Suddenly, a huge hairtail-like creature rushed out. This huge hairtail actually rushed out of the clouds. Zoro said in shock, "Oilfish." The huge hairtail-like creature that rushed out from the clouds was more than 30 meters long, and its mouth was big enough to swallow a bison. The huge hairtail that rushed out of the clouds rushed towards the modified melee. The modification of the Mary has already been targeted by a huge hairtail. Sauron jumped up suddenly at this critical moment, and he pulled Onitsu out of the scabbard at his waist. The ghost in Zoro's hand quickly swung at the giant hairtail that was attacking. The giant hairtail opened its mouth and bit towards Sauron. It was as if he wanted to swallow Zoro directly in one breath. Sauron swung Onitsu and aimed a knife at the head of the giant hairtail. This knife directly cut the head of the huge hairtail. The head of the giant hairtail was separated from the mouth, and half of the giant hairtail's head was chopped off. The huge hairtail that had been killed slammed heavily on the deck of the refitted melee. Zoro landed on the deck again, and he put guide back into the sheath on his waist. Anti-collection, automatic loading failed, click mode, the following content is hidden, please exit reading mode. Aeon Sikdavitiv. Pirates Plant Fruit /L. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 728. Chopper cautiously walked to the side of the giant hairtail. This big guy is really scary. Chopper looked at the huge hairtail like this. This little guy was full of fear of all kinds of huge monsters from the bottom of his heart. Robin walked to the huge hairtail and observed the behemoth. Robin said, "This huge guy actually rushed out of the clouds. Could it be that it lives in the clouds? Since this huge hairtail fish rushed out of the clouds, it also illustrates the problem that living things can survive in the clouds." Sanji walked to the side of the giant hairtail. After observing the giant hairtail, he said, "Isn't this guy the legendary empty fish?" Before everyone came to the sky through the rising sea currents, they had seen Mont Blanc no Lando's logbook. It once mentioned the very strange special creature empty fish from the empty island. Sanji has always wanted to meet Sorrow with his own eyes. At this time, he was finally able to see Skyfish with his own eyes. After seeing Sorrow with his own eyes, Sanji also thought about it. Sanji looked at the vast clouds and said, "There must be more kinds of empty fish in these clouds." At this moment, there was another tremor in the clouds near the refitted Mary. This time it wasn't the side of the hull before, but the bow of the Mary. In front of the bow of the Melee, suddenly a huge figure rushed out of the clouds. This gigantic figure was no other creature, but a gigantic squid. The tentacles of this giant squid alone are more than 30 meters long. It can be called a giant squid in the sky. There's another big guy. Rog, Sanji, and the others looked at the giant squid that suddenly appeared. X33 Novel Mobile Version TTS. This king squid quickly entangled the modified Mary with its more than 10 huge tentacles. After the modified Melly was entangled by the king squid, it began to shake violently. This huge squid was very powerful, and the hull of the refitted Melly was violently bumped, as if in a tsunami. Rog took the lead, using his plant fusion ability to stretch out a stake air cannon from his right hand. Roger put it on his right hand, gathered air, and compressed it. Rog aimed the stake air cannon that gathered high-pressure air at the giant squid. 0. Try this, stake air cannon, fire. The stake air cannon on Rog's right hand shot out a powerful compressed air stream. This compressed airflow hit the king squid like a grenade. The king squid trembled for a while after being hit. Woo 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 X. The huge monster let out a cry like a ghost crying. But it wasn't over yet. Luffy waved his fists and punched dozens of times in a very short period of time. Rubber storm. Luffy's fists hit the giant squid like a storm. The king squid was violently hit and trembled violently. But that hasn't done the most damage yet. Sanji also quickly spun on one leg. The curly-browed man was going to use his most powerful attack. Devil's Foot. After the rotation, Sanji's right foot and right calf became like iron in an iron-making furnace. Sanji quickly jumped into mid-air in the state of Demon Wind's feet. At this time, Sanji had already jumped above the giant squid. The devil's feet are the finishing touch. Sanji turned violently in the air, and kicked the king squid's head hard with his right foot. The king squid's head was hit hard by Sanji's Demon Wind kick. Boom! A sound that shook the sky. The giant squid was kicked hard in the head by the devil's wind kick. After the head of this king squid was kicked by the demon wind, its huge head began to make a scorching sound. There was even the sound of cranial bones cracking. The king squid was badly injured. It received a devastating blow to the head. Sanji rolled and kicked the king squid's attack in mid-air, which was seen by Roger and Usopp. This finishing touch was like a small sun shining like a small sun. The lethality is huge and the visual impact is huge. The sound resounded through the sky even more. After the giant squid was hit, the dozen or so huge tentacles wrapped around the modified Melee began to loosen. The king squid started to fall into the clouds. Usopp and Luffy looked at the fallen king squid in shock. Rog also admired again and again in his heart. Sanji's attack this time is indeed very powerful. After Sanji finished his attack, he landed on the deck of the modified Mary again. This man who has always regarded himself as a knight and a gentleman half-kneeled on the deck. Sanji then stood up again, and he turned to look at Nami and the others on the deck. I saw Nami staying there with a surprised expression on her face. When Sanji saw this, he immediately rushed to Nami with a smile on his face, and offered her courtesies. Sanji said to Nami diligently, "Miss Nami, was the knight in my battle just now very handsome? Did he successfully protect Miss Nami?" Nami is actually immersed in the fear of being suddenly attacked by the king squid just now. Of course, Sanji's battle is indeed shocking. Nami reacted and quickly said to Sanji, "Ah, your attack is very powerful." Although it was an ordinary compliment in a flat tone, it made Sanji feel ecstatic. Sanji looked at Nami and said very happily, "Miss Nami, it is really an honor for the knight to protect your safety. Don't worry, as long as you are on the empty island, nothing can threaten Miss Nami's safety. Because there is always a loyal and considerate knight by your side." Zoro glanced at Sanji, feeling numb for a while. "Humph." Sauron snorted in disgust. "Luffy is observing the defeated King Squid." Roger also went to the bow to observe the downed King Squid. The giant squid is now lying on top of the clouds. Sanji's demon windfoot attack just now actually caused a fatal attack on the King Squid. The devil's wind feet smashed the skull of the giant squid into pieces. On the surface, the body of the giant squid seems to be relatively intact as a whole, but in fact, the inside of the skull has been shattered. Anti-collection, automatic loading failed, click mode, the following content is hidden, please exit reading mode. Aeon sick derivative. Pirates plant fruit / L pirate plant fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 729. No matter what, everyone got used to the environment of the sky. At this time, Chopper picked up the telescope and observed above the clouds in the distance. In Chopper's telescope, he saw a sailboat above the clouds in the distance. 0W, W.78Z. Working hard to update, please refresh later to visit. This chapter is correct. 78.co/49. 49252/. Novel about the proud son-in-law god of war. Novel about the proud son-in-law god of war. What happened that night 5 years ago was a nightmare that Zhang Yingxiu would never forget. She was originally the most beautiful woman in Ningcheng, the most beautiful woman in the country, and her pursuers were like crucian carp crossing the river. However, no one expected that this most beautiful woman in Ningcheng would inexplicably give birth to a child out of wedlock, and she became a laughingstock for a while. The Zhang family was considered a well-known wealthy family in Ningcheng. Mr. Zhang was very angry when his granddaughter, who was originally proud of him, did something that ruined the family tradition. Coupled with the instigation of Zhang Yingxiu's uncle Zhang Yushan, Mr. Zhang deprived Zhang Bingshan of his position and only left Zhang Yingxiu in the company as a sinecure. Lin Xianzhen quickly prepared the meal, but he was not qualified to serve it. The family ate in the living room, while Lin Xianzhen ate in the kitchen. Zhang Guifan complained from the living room. "What is this made of? It tastes terrible. If you don't think it tastes good, just make it yourself," Zhang Yingxiu said coldly. "Why did I give birth to a daughter like you, who was so pickpocketing? You actually spoke up for that wimp." Zhang Guifan put down her chopsticks and said angrily. "Okay, what's the point of making a fuss over a meal? I'll cook it the worst tomorrow," Zhang Bingshan said. However, Zhang Lingzi was eating happily. At this time, there was a knock on the door, and Zhang Bingshan got up and opened the door. "Junja, why are you here? Come in and sit down. The visitor is Zhang Junja, Zhang Yushan's son and the future heir of the Zhang family." Zhang Junja walked in. If it weren't for the Zhang family's business, he would never come to this shabby place like the Zhang family's old house. Compared with the Zhang family's big villa, this place is simply a doghouse. Looking at the shabby sofa, Zhang Junja didn't even sit down, worried that he would stain his clothes. Zhang Guifan enthusiastically went to pour water for Zhang Junja and asked, "Junja, why did you come here in person? Zhang Junja looked contemptuous and did not even take the water glass from Zhang Gaifen's hand. He said to Zhang Yingxiu, I'm here to talk to you about the company. Say. Zhang Yingxiu continued to hold Zhang Lingzi and feed her, saying coldly. Cooperating with the Wang group is very important to us. You are also a member of the Zhang family, so you must contribute, Zhang Junja said. The Wang Group is one of the largest companies in Ningcheng and has many projects in hand. The Zhang family has always wanted to curry favor with the Wang Group. Wang Weigang, the young master of the Wang Group, fell in love with Zhang Yingxiu and proposed a marriage. Mr. Zhang forced Zhang Yingxiu to marry. After experiencing what was like a nightmare 5 years ago, Zhang Yingxiu was extremely disgusted with men and sternly refused. In desperation, she deliberately found a Mu to marry to cut off Wang Weigang's thoughts. I can't help, Zhang Yingxiu said coldly. Zhang Yingxiu. If you marry young Master Wang honestly, the cooperation has been negotiated long ago. I don't understand, what's wrong with young Master Wang? If you marry her, do you still need to live in this shabby place? Does young Master Wang not as good as Lin Xianzhen, a useless mute? Do you think he is a champion? Zhang Junja said with disdain, young Master Wang doesn't dislike you. This is your honor. Young Master Wang said that if you stay with him for 2 days, our cooperation can be signed. It's time for you to contribute to the Zhang family. A cold look suddenly appeared on Zhang Yingxiu's face, and she said coldly, get out. What did you say? How dare you call me out? Zhang Junja was furious, walked over, and said arrogantly, Zhang Yingxiu, don't be shameless. You are just a ruined flower. Why are you pretending to be noble with me? Follow me to see Mr. Wang immediately. I am not discussing this with you, this is an order. Roll. Zhang Yingxiu suddenly slapped her chopsticks on the table, her eyes filled with anger. Kaiba Chinese first release. Junja, our Yingxiu is already married, isn't it inappropriate to do this? It will also be bad for her reputation. Is there no other way? After all, she is her own daughter, so Zhang Gaifen still has to protect her. Zhang Junja snorted disdainfully, reputation? She has completely disgraced the Zhang family, what kind of reputation does she need? Who in the whole Ningcheng doesn't know about her scandal? This is Grandpa's order. She can still do it with her ruined body, it was an honor for her to contribute. Zhang Junja had a charitable expression on his face and said proudly, of course, the Zhang family will not treat you badly after the matter is completed. Zhang Yingxiu's position in the company will be adjusted, and another 500,000 will be awarded. Mr. Zhang approved 2 million, but Zhang Junja felt that Zhang Yingxiu was in ruins, so giving her 500,000 was too much. Zhang Yingxiu stood up and pointed at the door. Her whole body was shaking. She was obviously on the verge of going berserk. She said coldly, I'm telling you to get lost. Do you understand? Zhang Yingxiu, did I give you face? Zhang Junja slapped his hand on the table with a fierce look on his face, which scared Zhang Lingzi to tears. 78 Chinese is the fastest updated on the entire network. C Delta M. Zhang Bingshan on the side did not dare to speak, and Zhang Gaifen was even more silent, unable to offend Zhang Junja. At this time, Lin Xianzhen came out of the kitchen and stood in front of Zhang Junja. You dumb mute, what do you want to do? Get out of here. Snapped. HTT target equals blank. Novel of Aoshiu God of War. M.78, W/49. 49252/. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Li Er a Dream. Chapter 730. Boom. Luffy was kicked, rolled over and hit the deck. Finally, the masked warrior attacked Rog. Rog clenched his fists and prepared to fight, and at the same time took out the Kinkan bamboo spear. Wearing hard walnut armor, 0W, W.78Z. Working hard to update, please refresh the visit later. This chapter is correct. 78.co/49. 49252/. Novel about the proud son-in-law god of war. Novel about the proud son-in-law god of war. What happened that night 5 years ago was a nightmare that Zhang Yingxiu would never forget. She was originally the most beautiful woman in Ningcheng, the most beautiful woman in the country, and her pursuers were like crucian carp crossing the river. However, no one expected that this most beautiful woman in Ningcheng would inexplicably give birth to a child out of wedlock, and she became a laughing stock for a while. The Zhang family was considered a well-known wealthy family in Ningcheng. Mr. Zhang was very angry when his granddaughter, who was originally proud of him, did something that ruined the family tradition. Coupled with the instigation of Zhang Yingxiu's uncle Zhang Yushan, Mr. Zhang deprived Zhang Bingshan of his position and only left Zhang Yingxiu in the company as a sinecure. Kaiba Chinese first release. Lin Xianzhen quickly prepared the meal, but he was not qualified to serve it. The family ate in the living room, while Lin Xianzhen ate in the kitchen. Zhang Gaifan complained from the living room. "What is this made of? It tastes terrible. If you don't think it tastes good, just make it yourself," Zhang Yingxiu said coldly. "Why did I give birth to a daughter like you, who was so pickpocketing? You actually spoke up for that wimp." Zhang Gaifan put down her chopsticks and said angrily. "Okay, what's the point of making a fuss over a meal? I'll cook it the worst tomorrow," Zhang Bingshan said. However, Zhang Lingzi was eating happily. At this time, there was a knock on the door, and Zhang Bingshan got up and opened the door. "Junja, why are you here? Come in and sit down. The visitor is Zhang Junja, Zhang Yushan's son and the future heir of the Zhang family." Zhang Junja walked in. If it weren't for the Zhang family's business, he would never come to this shabby place like the Zhang family's old house. Compared with the Zhang family's big villa, this place is simply a doghouse. Looking at the shabby sofa, Zhang Junja didn't even sit down, worried that he would stain his clothes. Zhang Gaifan enthusiastically went to pour water for Zhang Junja and asked, "Junja, why did you come here in person?" Zhang Junja looked contemptuous and did not even take the water glass from Zhang Gaifan's hand. He said to Zhang Yingxiu, "I'm here to talk to you about the company." "Say." Zhang Yingxiu continued to hold Zhang Lingzi and feed her, saying coldly, "Cooperating with the Wang Group is very important to us. You are also a member of the Zhang family, so you must contribute," Zhang Junja said. The Wang Group is one of the largest companies in Ningcheng and has many projects in hand. The Zhang family has always wanted to curry favor with the Wang Group. Wang Weigang, the young master of the Wang Group, fell in love with Zhang Yingxiu and proposed a marriage. Mr. Zhang forced Zhang Yingxiu to marry. After experiencing what was like a nightmare 5 years ago, Zhang Yingxiu was extremely disgusted with men and sternly refused. In desperation, she deliberately found a Mu to marry to cut off Wang Weigang's thoughts. "I can't help," Zhang Yingxiu said coldly. Zhang Yingxiu, if you marry young Master Wang honestly, the cooperation has been negotiated long ago. I don't understand, what's wrong with young Master Wang? If you marry her, do you still need to live in this shabby place? Does young Master Wang not as good as Lin Xianzhen, a useless mute? Do you think he is a champion?" Zhang Junja said with disdain, "Young Master Wang doesn't dislike you. This is your honor." Young Master Wang said that if you stay with him for 2 days, our cooperation can be signed. It's time for you to contribute to the Zhang family. A cold look suddenly appeared on Zhang Yingxiu's face, and she said coldly, "Get out." "What did you say? How dare you call me out?" Zhang Junja was furious, walked over, and said arrogantly, "Zhang Yingxiu, don't be shameless. You are just a ruined flower. Why are you pretending to be noble with me? Follow me to see Mr. Wang immediately. I am not discussing this with you, this is an order. Roll." Zhang Yingxiu suddenly slapped her chopsticks on the table, her eyes filled with anger. Junja, our Yingxiu is already married, isn't it inappropriate to do this? It will also be bad for her reputation. Is there no other way? After all, she is her own daughter, so Zhang Gaifan still has to protect her. Zhang Junja snorted disdainfully, reputation? She has completely disgraced the Zhang family, what kind of reputation does she need? Who in the whole Ningcheng doesn't know about her scandal? This is Grandpa's order. She can still do it with her ruined body. It was an honor for her to contribute. Zhang Junja had a charitable expression on his face and said proudly, of course, the Zhang family will not treat you badly after the matter is completed. Zhang Yingxiu's position in the company will be adjusted, and another 500,000 will be awarded. Mr. Zhang approved 2 million, but Zhang Junja felt that Zhang Yingxiu was in ruins, so giving her 500,000 was too much. Zhang Yingxiu stood up and pointed at the door. Her whole body was shaking. She was obviously on the verge of going berserk. She said coldly, I'm telling you to get lost. Do you understand? Zhang Yingxiu, did I give you face? Zhang Junja slapped his hand on the table with a fierce look on his face, which scared Zhang Lingzi to tears. 78 Chinese is the fastest updated on the entire network. C Delta M. Zhang Bingshan on the side did not dare to speak, and Zhang Gaifan was even more silent, unable to offend Zhang Junja. At this time, Lin Xianzhen came out of the kitchen and stood in front of Zhang Junja. You dumb mute, what do you want to do? Get out of here. Snapped. HTT** target equals blank. Novel of Ao Xiu God of War. M.78, W/49. 49252/. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Li Are a Dream. Chapter 731. But everyone on the Merry, Rog, Zoro, Sanji, Luffy, Nami, and Chopper all blinked strangely. Only Robin remained calm. Usopp was still trembling like an ostrich. Nami asked strangely, excuse me, we don't understand what you are talking about. Could you please explain what Iker is? When Nami asked this question, Ganfuer also understood a little bit. He sighed and said, didn't you come here from the highway? If you want to reach the sky from there, you need to pass through several sky islands. Nami felt very strange when she heard this. She asked Ganfuer, high-speed air road. What is that? Is there any other way to get here? Ganfuel looked at everyone and said, of course, there is more than one way to get to the Sky Island. But it seems that you came up through that terrible monster current. There are still people who are so brave these days. Man, you young people are so admirable. Nami immediately became very frustrated and said, I knew there was more than one way to get here. At this time, Usopp, who was trembling like an ostrich, suddenly stood up. Usopp saw that it was very safe now, and also heard what the Sky Knight said. The long-nosed braggart immediately straightened his back, pointed his thumb at himself and said proudly, ah, no need to be amazed. Originally, this group of crew members cried to the sky and did not dare to ride on the rising tide to reach the sky. But Usopp, under the heroic leadership of the captain, they overcame their inner fears, followed Captain Usopp to bravely ride the terrifying rising current, and finally overcame many difficulties and came to the sky. The more Nami listened, the uglier her face became. She grabbed Usopp's face and scolded him seriously, the leather is almost broken. Ganfuel looked at the people on board the Melee and said, it's really surprising. These days, there are still people coming here on that monster current. Only a few % of the people who came here in other ways can survive. But riding on that monster current is different. If you come here by riding the rising current that you Qinghai people call, either everyone will die or they will all arrive. 0 or 100 survival. You Qinghai people are so brave, how dare you ride the upwelling current to the sky? Rog looked at Ganfuel and said, "Excuse me, it seems that you are talking about more than one empty island. Kaiba Chinese genius can remember it in 1 second. C delta mm.7:8z. Ganfuel said, "Yes, there is indeed more than one empty island. In the vast sky of this world, there are many empty islands. According to my previous people from Qinghai, the sea below the sky is a Gaia, the sea area near the island. What can rise in the sea is looking for the empty island." Nami looked at Ganfuel strangely and said, "Qinghai? People from Qinghai? What is that?" Ganfuel looked at Nami and said, "Ah, this is your first time here after all. No wonder you don't know. Qinghai is what the residents of Sky Island call the ordinary sea below. Qinghai people naturally refer to the people living in the sea below also. This is the White Sea, and to go to Sky Island, you need to go to the upper White Sea, where Sky Island is located." Nami said, "What a weird title." Rog asked Ganfor again, "So Mr. Ganfor, you must know how to reach the nearest empty island." Ganfor looked at Rog and said, "Of course I know, but by the way, it seems that you don't have Iker to pay. That is equivalent to the Bailey of Qinghai. It is also a kind of currency." Hearing this, Nami's expression immediately became calm. Nami is very concerned about everything related to money and is extra cautious. Ganfal took out a whistle and threw it at Nami. Nami caught it. It was a very ordinary steel whistle, but it was very new. Ganfor explained to the whistle, "After all, I am a professional mercenary, and I also need payment to live. But I am very happy to meet you brave young people today. So this service is free, and I can provide you with free help again. As long as you blow this whistle loudly when you need it at a critical moment, I will fly over on Pierre. Well, I am leaving to find other businesses." Ganfor turned to the strange bird Pierre beside him and said, "Pierre, let's go." Pierre spread his wings, and Ganfor rode on his back. The strange bird flapped its wings and flew up. Suddenly Pierre's body began to change. The original two huge bird claws began to grow bigger, his body began to become more majestic, and even two legs grew out of the front torso. The wings also grew bigger. Pierre's head began to change, from the original bird's beak to more like a horse's beak. Ganfor began to explain, "Don't be surprised, Pierre is a bird that ate the horse fruit. He can change his body to become a Pegasus." Pierre finally turned into a Pegasus. But this Pegasus is still pink with brown spots. Although the head has changed from that of a strange bird to that of a horse, it still looks stupid and funny. It's just that the pair of wings are still huge, enough to make Pierre, who has become a bigger Pegasus, fly fast. Pierre. Pegasus Pierre neighed loudly with his horse's mouth. On the deck of the Mary, whether it was Rog and Zoro, or Nami, Luffy, and Sanji, they were all stunned. Just a look of disappointment and embarrassment. "The gap is too great," Nami complained in disappointment. "Everyone else thinks the same way." Ganfor, who was riding on the back of the Pegasus Pierre, steered the Pegasus and began to fly away. "Young people, I hope we can meet again. Drive. Drive." Ganfor flew away with Pegasus Pierre. Soon the Pegasus and the Sky Knight disappeared from everyone's sight. Sanji looked at the sky and said, "What a strange old man." Nami, on the other hand, observed the whistle that Ganfuel gave him very carefully. Nami said, "He said that you can blow this whistle loudly and invite him to support you again for free." At this time, Usopp and Luffy came to Nami together, and they also observed the whistle very carefully. Luffy took the whistle from Nami's hand, put it to his mouth and said, "How does it feel to blow this whistle? Will that old man really come here?" Luffy immediately made a gesture of wanting to blow the whistle. Don't want. Usopp and Nami hurried to stop Luffy's behavior. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 732. The two held Luffy together to prevent him from messing around. Zoro looked at the sky near the Mary and said, "The old man only revealed limited information, and how to get to that empty island is still a big problem." After hearing this, Luffy put the whistle to his mouth again and said, "That's good. Just call that old man over." Usopp and Nami are in a hurry again. The two held half of Luffy's face and one arm each. "Hey, this thing can only be used once. We can only use it at critical moments." Nami gritted her teeth. "Don't be such a bastard. What if that masked monster attacks again?" Usopp desperately held Luffy back. In the end, Luffy succumbed to the desperate efforts of the two. Rog said, "The Sky Knight just said that this is the White Sea. There is also the White Sea on the upper level, and the Sky Island is located there." Zoro looked at the others and said, "The bigger problem is still there. The four of us were easily defeated by that weird guy wearing a mask just now. No matter how strong the enemy is, we will not be defeated so miserably. But you can also it feels like our physical strength is restricted due to poor breathing." Sanji moved his arms and legs and said, "It's true, the air here is thin, so moving is indeed much worse than down there. But we have to wait for us to get used to it." Rog looked at the surrounding clouds and said, "Now that the Sky Knight has left, there is nothing we can do. We need to continue to sail the Melee and find a route to the Sky Island." Everyone started to steer the Melee again. Fortunately, there is wind in the sky, so the sailboat Mary can sail above the clouds with the help of wind. Usopp took out his binoculars and began to observe. "Wait, look this way. I found a very strange thing." Usopp discovered something through the telescope that shocked him. Rog and Zoro arrived beside Usopp, and everyone looked in the direction Usopp pointed. Among the clouds, there is a huge waterfall flowing continuously. Fall. Roger looked at the huge waterfall in the clouds, feeling very surprised. There is such a thing as a waterfall in the clouds. The clouds here not only can carry ships to float and sail like sea water, but also have such huge waterfalls. That's really a waterfall. Nami was also very surprised. There are waterfalls among the clouds. It's incredible. Chopper observed the huge waterfall in the distance. Remember, in 1 second read wonderful novels for free. Zoro said, "Okay, let's sail there." Luffy saw the huge waterfall and shouted excitedly, "Okay. Head towards the waterfall." The Mary began sailing towards the great waterfall in the distance. After sailing hundreds of meters, the pirate ship approached the huge waterfall. Now the huge waterfall can be seen more clearly. I saw that the huge waterfall was indeed flowing. Nami looked at the huge waterfall and said, "This huge waterfall is also flowing." Robin looked at a large cloud in front of the Mary and said, "Let's stop for a moment." The Mary then stopped. Because others also saw the large cloud in front of the ship. This large cloud blocked the Mary's progress. The Mary was unable to advance because of this large cloud. This cloud looks a little weird compared to the clouds under the hull. Something feels wrong. Nami looked at the cloud blocking the road ahead, full of doubt. Luffy waved his fist and said, "You'll understand if you touch it." Luffy's arm stretched suddenly, and his hand touched this large cloud. When Luffy's hand touched this large cloud, it felt as if his hand had touched a large piece of cotton. Huh? It's actually so soft. Luffy retracted his arm, he was very surprised by the touch of the cloud. Luffy then jumped towards the big cloud. Puff. Luffy landed on top of this big cloud, and his body began to bounce as if on a spring bed. Wow, it's so comfortable. It's softer than a quilt here. Luffy excitedly bounced back and forth on the large cloud. Chopper on the Mary saw Luffy bouncing back and forth on the big cloud. Looks like fun. Chopper was very envious when he saw it. Get out of the way, get out of the way. I'll play on it too. Usopp ran for a while, and jumped when he reached the edge of the ship. This long-nosed man who loves excitement and playthings also jumped onto this big cloud. Poof. 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 Usopp's body bounced back and forth on top of the big cloud. Wow, it's so squishy. Usopp felt the amazing softness of this large cloud. I can't help it. I want to participate too. Chopper finally couldn't resist the temptation. He also turned into a human form, and then jumped towards the big cloud with his strong leg strength. Chopper jumped on this big cloud and, like Luffy and Usopp, bounced violently on it repeatedly. Nami looked at the three people playing on the big cloud. She frowned and said, but in this case, this kind of cloud must be an obstacle. The ship needs to continue sailing. How can we do it better? I saw the route. Give it to me. Rog used the plant fusion ability at this time. A branch wing comes out of Rog's body. The wings of this pair of branches are fully 6 meters long. With this pair of branch wings, Rog started to fly. The branches and wings flapped violently, and Rog's body flew up like a birdman. Rog said to Nami and Zoro on the Mary, I will observe the direction for everyone from a high place and guide the Mary. Nami looked up at Rog, who was flying with the wings of branches, and said, this is a good method. Then Nami shouted to Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper who were continuing to play on the big cloud, stop playing and come back. Rog, who was flying in the air with the wings of branches, observed the situation at the huge waterfall in the distance. There is actually a huge door in front of that huge waterfall. It seemed to be some kind of entrance. Rog shouted to Nami and the others on the deck of the melee, there is a huge door in front of the waterfall. I will guide everyone there later. Nami shouted, okay, it's all up to you. Zoro said very strangely, a huge door. Next, under the guidance of Rog, the melee continued to change directions. After bypassing this large cloud, I encountered more large clouds during the journey. If the clouds below the Mary are equivalent to sea water, then these large clouds are equivalent to small icebergs.